When most people think about ancient Rome, they picture legions of stoic male soldiers conquering barbarian tribes and emperors, giving rousing speeches while gesturing wildly with their hands. But this image only tells part of the story. The reality of daily life in Rome was quite different, and women were far more active in public life than their counterparts in Greece or the modern Western world. While it's true that Roman women couldn't vote or hold public office, their lives weren't nearly as restricted as those of women in other societies. In fact, when ancient Romans went out for an afternoon of fun in the public bathhouse or a night of drinking and debauchery in taverns and brothels, it was usually women who led the way. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're exploring the scandalous truth about women in ancient Rome. If you like what you see, be sure to subscribe for more videos about ancient Rome and other historical civilizations. As the Roman Empire grew larger and wealthier, its citizens had more leisure time and money to spend on entertainment. This led to a massive expansion in the size and number of bathhouses across the empire, which were more than just places for getting clean. They were social hubs where people from all walks of life could come together and relax. Of course, many of the patrons at these establishments were men, but they were usually accompanied by female slaves or prostitutes, who provided massages and other forms of entertainment. In fact, it was common for wealthy Romans to bring their wives and daughters to the baths, where they would bathe together and chat with friends. Even the emperor's wife or mother sometimes accompanied him to the public baths, such as Julia Maesa, grandmother of the infamous Nero, who took great pleasure in bathing with other women, both young and old. Women also attended the baths for beauty treatments, which were extremely popular. One writer even reported seeing a woman having a wax mask applied in an effort to improve her appearance. Considering the lack of effective cosmetics at the time, it's safe to say that Roman women probably didn't appreciate the irony of covering up their natural beauty with artificial wax. While the public baths were open to all genders, there were separate areas for men and women, as well as sections designated for specific activities. For example, there might be a frigidarium, or cold bath, a tepidarium, or lukewarm bath, and a caldarium, or hot bath. There might also be rooms for exercise, massage, or simply relaxing. Despite these precautions, though, things could get pretty raunchy in the Roman baths. For instance, some men preferred the company of young male slaves, who would rub their bodies with oil and scrape it off to remove dirt and dead skin. The oil was then saved and used for cleaning purposes, until it became too rancid to use anymore. To make matters worse, customers often shared towels and didn't always wash them afterward, so the next customer would be greeted by a towel that smelled like stale sweat and urine. However, some bathhouses attempted to combat this problem by hiring female slaves to wash customers' towels. These women would scrub the towels with a brush and scrape them with a metal tool to remove any remaining dirt or oils. Once the towels were clean, they would hang them up to dry and issue them to fresh customers. Unfortunately, these women were often subjected to sexual harassment from the male customers, and if they refused to comply, they were beaten by the establishment's guards. Despite these drawbacks, attending the baths was a beloved pastime for Romans of all ages and genders. It was a chance to socialize, relax, and get clean, all while enjoying the company of beautiful women. Another place where women played a major role in Roman nightlife was in taverns and brothels. While ancient Rome did have some establishments that catered specifically to male customers, there were plenty of others that catered to women too. In fact, there were even taverns and brothels that catered exclusively to female patrons. One writer described a tavern that he visited which had prostitutes dressed up as hairy wild men waiting to pounce on unsuspecting customers. He was so shocked by the sight that he fell victim to paralysis and couldn't speak for several days. But not all taverns and brothels were created equal. There were some establishments that catered to the city's poorest residents, while others were frequented by the elite classes. The more upscale taverns and brothels often featured live music and dancing, as well as food and drink specials. These establishments were a popular spot for upper-class Romans to let loose and enjoy themselves without worrying about being judged. And it wasn't uncommon for women to be the center of attention at these parties. For example, during the festival of Bacchus, which honored the god of wine, Roman women would dress up as men and lead the festivities. They would parade through the streets with their male slaves in tow, drinking and singing as they went. They would also put on theatrical performances and compete against each other in chariot races. When you think about it, it's kind of ironic that Roman women were able to do things like drive chariots during this festival, yet they still couldn't vote or hold political office in the rest of society. It wasn't just festivals where women were prominent. Roman women could also be seen at gladiatorial combats, chariot races, and other public events. While the Colosseum is now known as the home of brutal combat sports, it wasn't always used for violent spectacles. In the early days, it was primarily used for theatrical performances, animal hunts, and even staged naval battles. Women were welcome to attend these events and often did so with their male companions. They would watch intently as the gladiators fought to the death or the animals were slain by the hunters. Sometimes the women would even participate in the hunts, taking down small game with their own weapons. While women were allowed to participate in some public activities, they were generally expected to stay out of the political arena. Women were barred from holding public office and were considered to be the property of their fathers or husbands. However, this doesn't mean that women had no influence over politics. In fact, some women were quite wealthy and used their money to gain influence over their husbands or sons, who were often involved in politics. For example, the wealthy Livia Drusilla was the wife of Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, and she is believed to have had a significant influence over him. She was a shrewd politician and was said to be involved in the selection of her husband as advisors. She also played a key role in the adoption of her stepson, Tiberius, as Augustus's heir. Ancient Rome was full of strange and interesting people, including women who dressed up as men to fight in the Roman army. You won't believe what these brave women got up to and how they pulled off such a daring stunt. But that's not all. There were also Roman women who practiced medicine, despite the fact that it was largely a male-dominated profession. These women were highly skilled and respected in their field, and they made significant contributions to the medical knowledge of their time. One of the most famous Roman women doctors was Cornelia Metella, who lived in the 1st century AD. She was born into a wealthy family and had access to the best education available at the time. After studying medicine, she became one of the first female physicians to practice in Rome. Overall, women in ancient Rome had a much more active public life than women in many other societies of the ancient world. They were able to participate in festivals, visit bathhouses, and attend public events like chariot races and gladiator combats. While women in ancient Rome were still subject to the restrictions of Roman society, they were far from being confined to the domestic sphere. Their lives were full of opportunities for adventure, excitement, and public recognition. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning about the shocking ways that women participated in public life in ancient Rome. If you want to learn more about ancient Rome, check out the series in the description below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.